USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, November 13th, 2023. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. You could almost use a headline every week, down goes number one, but in big fashion, number one Boston College headed up to Orono and got beaten by Maine and then tied number 13 Maine, then number 13 Maine, and probably top 10 Maine this week. Maine's now 7-2-1. How about those Black Bears?
Wow. I'm not surprised, I guess, because I knew this would happen once Ben Barr got some time in that program. And he's bringing in some great recruits. And this is an older team. They have a couple of freshmen that are standouts, but, this is an older team with a lot of experience. And, I didn't get to see the Friday game. I got to watch the Saturday game. Happened to be off this Saturday and watch most of that game. And BC, I'll give them credit because they found ways to fall behind 1-0 and 2-1, 2-1 in the third period and tie that game late and then get the extra point in the shootout. So it didn't become a lost weekend heading up to Orono. But I like this Maine team. They certainly have to be a top 10 team. I mean, maybe, I don't know where they'll end up when the poll comes out, but maybe around number 8. I think that's where I had them on my ballot. I mean, they're phenomenal, and everybody keeps telling me that. I haven't got to see them in person. My weird schedule, the way it shakes out this year, I think I only get to see them once all year before the playoffs. But I know what Ben Barr does as a coach. He wins.
Yeah, you brought that up at the beginning of the year, Jimmy, that you thought Maine was going to be much improved and was going to be a surprise. And I guess it didn't take very long for them to start trying to show that you are correct. And to have this kind of weekend was pretty big for them. And I didn't get a chance to see any of their games. We were out in Alaska, so I did get a chance to watch a lot of games with the time change. And but I didn't get a chance to see that one. And but looks like they had a great weekend, obviously, to go. And like you said, Ed, down goes number one again.
Number 2, Denver had a split weekend with Arizona State, a 6-5 overtime loss the first night, and then rallied back from a 3-0 deficit to get the split on the weekend. This says some good things both about Denver and about the Sun Devils.
Yeah, I watched some of the game. I watched part of that first game, and Arizona State was flying. It was a great weekend. Obviously, Arizona State takes a big lead on Saturday and then allows Denver to come back, and some questionable goals by Sempton-Felter, but he's been outstanding for him. And for them to take down Denver, what can you say about the Independents? They've done pretty well so far this year.
Yeah, obviously we've had Arizona State on our radar since kind of week one, and they're a really good home team. They love playing at home in front of that crowd at Mullet Arena, and I think that you're right, Ed, that it does say a lot about both teams, because the comeback for Denver on Saturday, when you're down 3-0, then you plop 5 in a row. See Arizona State come back in the game, but you find a way to close it out. They get a couple of empty net goals. I think once the goalie was back in, it seemed that, just reading the box score, that they got an 8th one, but eight out of the last 9 goals in the game on the road, backs against the wall. That's a good statement right there for Denver. As much as you got to pat Arizona State on the back for getting the OT victory on Friday, and then really pushing Denver on Saturday. Denver ends up taking more points. I know it's not a conference matchup, but if this was a conference matchup, you'd be talking about taking 4 out of 6 points, because you did get to overtime on Friday night. So even in the pairwise, this one won't hurt Denver that much when this is calculated in March.
But if you look at it, this was 15 minutes to go in the second. They're down, so their comeback was pretty quick. And to do that fast, that's a pretty good comeback in that kind of circumstance. I will say the difference in weekends that Arizona State have, they go from barely sweeping Stonehill and getting into overtime and winning in overtime one week to winning in overtime against Denver. I'm sure that they'd like a little bit more consistency in their game.
I'm sure one felt a lot better than the other.
Yes, one's a relief and
Well,
one's a joy.
and it's a good indicator, a good preview of budding rivalry between these two teams, since they get to know each other very well in the scheduling pod that they will have in the NCHC next season. So I think those are going to be teams that see each other home and home quite a bit. They're splitting the teams into three team scheduling pods. So
Yeah.
Denver, Colorado College, and Arizona State will get to know each other quite well.
Yeah, that'll become some rivalries really quickly.
Well, let's look at number 3, Wisconsin. They got to kick their feet up and watch all the other games. So they had a spotless record on the weekend. And the way things are looking as we record just before the poll comes out, Wisconsin, shockingly, if you think about it from the beginning of the season, is going to be the new number 1 this week in the USCHO.com men's Division 1 ice hockey poll.
They would be my number 1
Yeah.
if you guys let me vote.
I believe it or not, we're going to mention them in a second. I actually put Providence number 1. Maybe it's just because I've seen so much Hockey East and I know how tough that conference is, and I think that Providence is a fantastic team. But I had a hard time. When I sent out the show notes, I actually gave the label for this segment of who's number 1, because I'm having a hard time even figuring out who number 1 is. BC, fantastic. Obviously, Denver, a great team. Wisconsin's doing things we didn't expect them to do. Providence is fantastic as well. North Dakota. I mean, all these teams are right there. It's hard to pick that number 1. But I have no qualms about Wisconsin jumping up to the first spot.
No,
Yeah,
it's
who
like
would
I
have
said,
thought
they
it?
would be my number 1, no doubt.
Yeah, they were number 1 on my ballot. USCHO does let me vote. We'll have to see. There's always an opportunity for Atlantic hockey coaches. We have some on our poll panel. We don't disclose who they are, but there's a pretty good distribution of coaches across college hockey. And I think if you add them up, pretty close to half the D1 coaches are on the panel. So that's some good input from people who should know the game pretty well. I would think so.
I do my duty here, so I'll let other people vote. They could take their hour and do that. I'll talk to you guys.
It's a lot easier to just talk than to crank the numbers and scratch your head for a ballot. I'll tell you that. Number 4, North Dakota. They swept Minnesota Duluth. They are banged up a bit, the Bulldogs, but that was a pair of road wins, which helps a ton in the pairwise come March, and they're now 7-2-1.
And they keep rolling. They're doing all the right things. They came out to Boston and played BU really tough a week ago. Got a overtime victory in one of those games, but 2 really close games there. And then they took care of business. This is actually a tough stretch when you think about so much road travel and being away from home, where they are very comfortable as a team. This is a really tough stretch. So they're checking some boxes right now for me.
Yeah, they are. They're probably one of the, with all the new players, we talk about surprises. I think they're a little bit of a surprise because of all the new players. They had how many defensemen returning? They didn't have a goalie returning.
Their
That's a
entire
surprise to
core
me.
is new when you really think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
4
a surprise
freshmen
a little
and
bit.
4
But
transfers.
I have a bigger surprise eventually, but that's one of the surprise stories for me.
Number 5, Providence. Early on in the season, head coach Nate Lehman talked about how much fun he was having this season, how much he enjoyed this team, and I'm sure he's enjoying the record now too. 8-1-2 after a sweep home and home with Northeastern.
Like I said, I have them as my number 1. Maybe it's because I've seen them in person. Maybe I think that this is a fantastic Providence team. It's probably the best they've been since they won the national championship. I think I actually put it in a story on USCHO on Saturday night. It is the best start since the season after the national championship. I think that one they started, it was 12-0-3 or 10-0-3. It was a fantastic start that year as well. Fell that year in the Hockey semis and then the first round of the NCAA tournament. But I think this is as good of a team as Nate Lehman's had. It's experienced. It's older. They've got some real talent across all 4 classes. Everybody, all four lines contribute on this team, and they have a really good Svedback. Their goaltender is probably, I think, the most stable goaltender in Hockey East. We talked about Maine. I think Victor Osman up there might be in that category, but you don't see a lot of bad goals from either of these guys. They're in position. They're very economical goaltenders, as I call them. They don't move too much. They're just really solid in the net. So I feel like this is one of the best built Providence teams I've seen in a long time.
I just thought that you were giving them your number one vote because your Hockey East paycheck comes through sometimes. No?
Well, then why wouldn't I give it to BC? I mean, I sat here last week and was the BC honk. I mean, I listed off their top 6 players, all freshmen. I mean, come on, I could have given it to BC. I really like this Providence team.
Yeah, you know them, you've seen them. I would just also like to say congratulations to Nate Lehman on becoming the all-time winningest coach at Providence. You think about the history of that program with Lou Lamoriello and all that, and he's done it pretty quickly. So congratulations to Nate on becoming the all-time winningest coach at Providence. That's for sure.
That's a great accomplishment because Lou Lamoriello did some fantastic things with that program. Got them to a Frozen Four, won the first Hockey East championship. The championship trophy is named the Lamoriello Trophy. I mean, that's how legendary Lou Lamoriello was before he went on to his career at the Devils and all the things he's done in the National Hockey League and Hockey Hall of Famer, U.S. Hockey Hall of Famer. So I'm sure Nate Lehman has to feel really proud to now be in that class. And the irony is it was win number 249. So the next win's going to be another milestone win as he gets to 250 at Providence. So that's fantastic. But you got to think, I mean, he's been there for 13 years. He had a great career as a head coach at Union prior. He's done some really good things at every program he's touched. He's a very successful coach, and you think of World Juniors as well, winning a gold medal with World Juniors, all of those things. He stands there as one of the active coaches that you maybe don't always think of on that coaching tree of like the best, but man, he wins. That's what it comes down to. Simplest, he wins no matter where he goes.
Well, we didn't mention BU. They began the week as number 9. They were one of 5 teams to sweep among the top 20. Only 5. They swept UMass Lowell, which is never an easy feat. So those 5 teams, Providence over Northeastern, North Dakota with a sweep over UMD. We had, as I just mentioned, BU beating UMass Lowell. Quinnipiac had Brown and Yale, kind of a sweep with the travel partner system in the ECAC, and Notre Dame getting a sweep over Penn State. And you know what? We've talked about the P word, not the pairwise P word, but the parity P word. It's probably, I think, time to just hang it up because that's the way it's going to be from now on, because there are no bad teams in college hockey. We talked about that last week, how there is such a surplus of good talent. There are not enough Division I positions for Division I players. And the skill level, the speed level, training, nutrition, everything involved with college hockey, you've got great players and very good teams. Parity should not be a surprise. We should see this just about every weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Matt Shasby up in Anchorage about this. It is hard to win. It is hard to win, and every game's tight. Every game's close. Every game's got good players. Every game's got a top line that you got to be aware of. Every team's got a good goalie. I mean, how does Stonehill go from almost beating Arizona State to what they did against Fairbanks this past weekend? How does you go up and down of things that happen in college hockey, and you see one team with a big win, and the next week they get beat? I mean, we were all over Holy Cross and how good they were, and they've struggled a little bit since then. I mean, it's up and down. It is hard to win. The margin of winning and losing is so thin. It's just making a play, blocking a shot, getting a puck out, getting a puck in, winning a face-off. That's how razor thin the margin is of winning and losing. And you use the word parity. I just think it's just hard to win in college hockey.
I agree with you, and I want to highlight out of that BU series. That's the first time BU has swept Lowell. Norm Bazin has been behind the bench. That's quite an impressive run for Lowell. I was a student at Lowell, and I believe when I got there as a freshman, Lowell had won once in the history against BU once, and that was a team that played 2, 3, 4 times every year. So they've kind of found a way to get back against a team that was one of their rivals in house. But you're right, Derek. It is really hard to sweep. I think that every team feels it. If especially with, you mentioned Quinnipiac, and I think that I've always said that it can be a little easier in the ECAC with the travel partners because you don't play the same team back to back nights. I think when you lose that first game in a series, the hunger that should come out of you in game two always shows. And if you're not ready as the team that won on Friday night or won in game one, you're going to get stopped. You have to come ready, and you can talk to players. And we mentioned this a few weeks ago, Derek. You can tell players all they want about how tough an opponent is going to be, but until they play them and see the hunger. So maybe you don't see that in night one. You think it's going to be an easy walkover in night two. Boom, you get crushed. And that's the reality of what it's like, I think, in modern day college hockey.
Well, with that, we'll take a break. We've got more to cover, including a standout player in the East, another coaching milestone we haven't mentioned yet, and our thoughts on what the biggest surprise is so far this season. That's when USCHO Weekend Review continues. We continue now with USCHO Weekend Review. Jim, you really wanted to highlight a player from BU, Macklin Celebrini. He has put up some amazing numbers, and even with missing a game on Friday, he was terrific on Saturday. Tell us about him.
I mean, unbelievable when I really look at how strong this player is. He's a young player. He's the youngest player in college hockey right now. Won't turn 18, I think, until after the college hockey season. Maybe it's right before the draft. He's draft eligible this year, predicted to go number one. But he took a pretty hard hit last Saturday night against North Dakota. Wore the non-contact jersey all week in practice. Did not play Friday, sat him out. Then he got a pretty big hit in the first minute and a half of Saturday's game. Took another one, and then went out and put up 4 assists. And he's just changing the game right now at BU. They have plenty of talent already. You think of Lane Hudson, who had a hat trick against North Dakota. His brother Quinn had another one this week against UMass Lowell. And then you have Celebrini, who's just scoring at will, and it doesn't have to be goals. He's just setting things up. He's so impressive to watch, and I've been around for long enough and covered enough NHL drafts where you could wait until the second round to see a college hockey player picked, or at least very late in the first round, 20s, 22, 23, and to know that this season isn't even a month and a half old, and we know that we're watching the next number one draft pick overall in the NHL, and he's on a college hockey campus. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's good for college hockey to continue to get these kind of high impact players. I haven't seen him play. Obviously, you've seen him in person, but you just look at the numbers that you put up. When have you seen numbers like this previously? I mean, this is 2 points a game. He's on pace for as a freshman, 60 plus points. I mean, you play 40 games. If they go a while, 80 points. Those are Paul Kariya type numbers.
Right.
And that's a different era too.
When there was 6 goals scored a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is when it's hard to score and all that. Yeah.
That main team, I think, averaged 5.95 goals a game. And here's a BU team that's probably going to average somewhere in the 4s. And this kid is going to maybe put up 80 points. It's very similar to what Jack Eichel did and then became, I think he was number 2 or number 3 to Buffalo. So, it's not too different. And unfortunately for folks on Commonwealth Ave, they're probably only going to get to see him this one season. I can't see a team taking him number 1 and then not bringing him right into camp. But it's special to watch. He's a real talent.
he took everything I wanted to say there. I even had Jack Eichel bringing that up. I had two things written down on my notes here: Paul Kariya and Jack Eichel, and he just took one of mine. So I might as well just throw it back to more Ed.
Well, let's talk about another coaching milestone. We mentioned Nate Lehman winning his 249th game. Rick Godkin, in his 36th season behind the bench at Mercyhurst, got his 600th win on Saturday evening, and I got to see that happen. It was, for him, I'm sure it was pretty special. First of all, we think about Rick Godkin. We've all known him for quite some time. Um, got started there at Mercyhurst, sort of doing everything. I mean, he was the guy doing the laundry and taking care of equipment and so forth. As they got started at the Division III level, they got to join the MAC when that came along. He's had success at D3, D2, and at D1, and it was a spectacular performance by his goaltender and a gutsy performance by his team. Simon Buechler, freshman goaltender, made 51 saves. His team also blocked 22 shots, and they won 2-0 against RIT in a game which they were outshot 51-14. And pretty exciting to get that victory. And again, kind of shows that anybody can beat anybody, and it's hard to get a win.
Well, I watched that game live in the coach's room, and you just kept waiting for the seal to break in that game for RIT, and the goalie was outstanding. And then as the game went on, and I want splits all over the place, right? So you want splits. You started rooting for Rick to get his 600th, and I had a text typed out, but I never send anything until the actual buzzer. So I sent him a text right when we were there, and I get back after the first period of our game and see it's Rick in true Rick fashion, because he's had good players, he's had good coaches, he's had good staff members. So this is more of a program milestone than it is a personal milestone. And he credited in his text to me. I'm sure it was a cut and paste to everybody and their brother,
I
because
think I
I'm
got
sure
the
he
same
was
one.
getting yeah, how it was a program milestone. And I said, hey, I'm happy to be on more with you getting 600. I'm happy to be on more of the plus side against him than the minus. And I think I'm like +1. But no, I'm happy for Rick's. As we all know, anybody in college hockey knows that Rick's a great advocate of college hockey and a great guy.
Fantastic guy. When I really think about coaches that I've known the longest, he's right up there. I think he might have been when I took over the MAC beat back in 1999. I think that was their first season in Division I hockey, and they were in the MAC. And he was the easiest coach to talk to, and always had time for me, which I always appreciated. Loved that about him. Um, I see him now. I'm glad that he's on the men's ice hockey committee, because every year at the Frozen Four, we can spend a number of hours, reliving old memories and talking about what's the future of college hockey and all of that stuff. And he, I know that his career is winding down. He's ready for retirement. He's told me that a few times. But to get number 600, I think it's really special. And you mentioned it at Division III, Division II, and Division I. I believe he's the only men's coach to have coached in all three of those tournaments: the Division III, Division II, and Division I men's ice hockey championships. So just hats off for that milestone. I'm so proud of him. He's a good friend, and he's a great advocate for college hockey.
I think I've been seeing Mercyhurst since they started the program. Way back in the day, they were way over in Erie, Pennsylvania, and they were looking for a league to play in and didn't have a place to do it. And former RIT athletic director Lou Spiotti went to bat for them to get them into the ECAC West. Fast forward a few years, when RIT was looking to move up and join Atlantic Hockey, who was the first one to advocate? It was Rick Godkin returning the favor. And, you mentioned about him being well liked. He served on committees and so forth, and has served the sport well.
I think he likes the free trips. That's what I think.
Let's move on to our last item, which is a question for each of us. What's our biggest surprise to this point? You can pick a player, a team, whatever you want to pick. Who wants to go first?
I'll let Derek go first. I don't want to steal his.
Okay.
Yeah, because I only had 2 hours of sleep to worry about this. Mine is, and I'm not gonna. It's not one, or it's not one. It's a group. Mine is hats off to the independents so far. Fairbanks, Anchorage, Arizona State. It's hard. It's hard not to be in a league. It's hard going up to Anchorage and seeing the travel that they have to do on a daily basis. It's worse at Fairbanks. It's hard to win in college hockey, like I said, and they're doing a pretty good job. So I'm not going to, I get into recruiting battles with a lot of them, so I'm not going to go an individual school, but all of them have done outstanding work from Fairbanks to where they are to Anchorage's win, Arizona State, Stonehill, how they're getting going, Lindenwood, you go down the list. So I'm going to say hats off to so far to the independents. I will stick to what I said last week. I think it's going to be a struggle for one of them to make the tournament with everything. I'm on that fence and that borderline. Jimmy said one for sure. We were joking too. I'm in that borderline.
I have a lot to choose from here. Obviously, I've mentioned Maine, but that's not supposed to be a surprise. I kind of picked that to happen. Obviously these independent teams have been great. I'm going to mention St. Thomas because they're up at the top of the CCHA right now. But the one team that keeps grabbing my eyes every time I look at a score sheet and they win another game in overtime, it's Princeton. Ron Fogarty has his team, 2-1-1 out of the gate. Their only loss, a 1-goal loss to Dartmouth. They tied Harvard. They found a way to earn overtime wins this weekend against Yale and then against Brown. This is a team that, listen, they had it rough the last year. That was a tough season for them. They're bouncing back, and I love seeing that. I want to see more Ivies compete. Now we all know what the Ivies went through during COVID: not playing, losing your players, getting your roster decimated. And some of these, especially some of the smaller Ivies, the ones not named Harvard and Cornell, they really went through it. And to see Ron Fogarty getting some wins here early, I love it. I think it's fantastic.
We've all talked about Wisconsin, so I'm not going to go with the obvious. And this is a team that has surprised me in a pleasant way, and that is Bentley. Andy Jones, in his first season behind the bench, has them off to a terrific start. They're 6-4 overall, 4-2 in conference. They swept Niagara at home last weekend. They had a split the weekend before that with American International. During the off season, people were talking to him, well, what kind of system are you going to put in place? Are you going to do something like what you did at UMass Lowell? And he didn't want to talk about any of that. He wanted to talk about culture and character and straightening things out. And Bentley has made a very quick turnaround and are off to a terrific start. They're way up in the standings in their conference. They are a pleasant surprise for that small but loyal bunch that follows the Falcons out there in Waltham.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, living just a mile away from their campus and getting around the Waltham community all the time, there's buzz about Bentley, and that's the first time I've been able to say that. When they opened their arena a few years back, there was some buzz back then, but they haven't had it since. And now there's that buzz, and people, with that beautiful arena, and it's a great atmosphere in there. A lot of youth hockey organizations go in, so hearing parents and families wanting to go to these games, it's exciting for me because I never had that real local team that I literally could walk to their arena any night I want. So yeah, I agree with you, and I'm a big Andy Jones fan.
Well, with that, I think we'll wrap things up for this edition of USCHO Weekend Review. For Derek Schooley, for Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll see you next week.